in sales. It's a little different because products can change, companies can be sold, things can happen outside of your control, and so you frequently have to rely back on your basic core principles and hard work.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams after turnarounds as chief executive. The largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes. I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Welcome to Bold Encounters. I'm Mark Cook and I'm with Brett Parkin, a lifelong friend who I have watched in many aspects of his life, lived very close to him coincidentally, but I've been fascinated for years to interview Brett because of two reasons. One, he has built from one person to hundreds a distributorship of artificial joints, very sophisticated technology in the medical industry, and he partners with multi-billion-dollar companies over his career to do so. And I have watched him sell a little bit and also partner as an executive with brand new relationships. And I don't know if I know anyone better at starting a new relationship and serving than Brett. And one of the other aspects is his work ethic. It's part of his very soul. It's not something he's learned like the rest of us. It's just part, it's in his bones, even in those artificial bones. And then second of all, I just want to hear his story about building this business and building a really successful, what has become a mid-sized business as a leader from the very beginning. How are you, Brett?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah.
Happy to tell my story, but it sounds way more glamorous coming from you than coming from me. But thank you for the very kind introduction.
I could do a solo. Yeah. I could tell about you all by myself. I don't even need you.
You're too kind.
Okay, so I want to start at the very beginning. I want to go all the way back, and you hadn't done this yet. You were essentially alone in work life at some moment, but this was a possibility. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I guess, to be honest, it never really was a possibility. My intention was to go to medical school. So I went through the process, applying to medical school, took the MCAT, did all those things. During that time, I got married. So by the time I applied to medical school, it wasn't just me. Obviously, I didn't get into medical school, and in that transition time, I had worked in a lab where I had rubbed shoulders with a lady from a company, and we'd become friends, built a nice relationship. I also had put myself through college by running a landscaping business, so when I didn't get into school, there was still plenty of work to do for a while, and then all of a sudden it snowed, and there was no school, and fortuitously the phone rang, and it was this kind lady from a lab I'd worked with who said, "You should go apply for this job selling orthopedic implants." I had no idea that was what that was because our research together had been through my father, who was an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, and so I said whatever. I really didn't have any job and wasn't sure where the future was going. I walked down, sat outside a gentleman's office who was on the phone with a rep in Las Vegas who was very unhappy with what was happening, and basically I could hear this guy saying, "Send me help tomorrow or I'm quitting." Luckily I was the next guy in for the interview. At the end of the interview, the gentleman that was doing the interview asked anything I should know. I said that I'd go to Las Vegas tomorrow, and so his eyes opened kind of wide and said, "Okay." We booked tickets. The next day we were in Las Vegas. I was taken to a surgery. Never having been in an orthopedic procedure, in that surgery, just so luck of the draw, I was working with an orthopedic surgeon who was really basically his first case out of his training. And we were doing a procedure I had never seen before, but yet I had all the implants and instruments. And anyway, things didn't go as good as they should have. There was some hardware tossed around the room, and we actually got a wonderful result for the patient, but it was a good learning experience for me. And that was kind of my start into orthopedic sales. I worked in Las Vegas for a company for about 2 years, and then got a job with another company that took me back home to Salt Lake City. Worked for a couple of different gentlemen in Salt Lake City. And then in 1995, I guess, end of 1995, after learning from the experience of the people before me, I started my own distributorship, and that was 1995, and it was me. And since then, it's been a really fun ride, and learned a lot. But that was sort of my into the business. If that's.
But you said something that makes me think about why I wanted to talk to you. The doctors. We can be respectful of them, but I've talked to you a few times over the years, and in a couple of conversations, there were things flying through an operating room that shouldn't be flying. Is that true? Does that happen on occasion? Does someone gets very angry and the wrong personality, and 1 in a million or 1 in 10 throw things?
There are very, very few times in my career that anybody's thrown anything. That was 100% my fault. I opened the wrong box. I was super nervous. I opened the wrong implant. This poor doctor's first case. But yeah, it's a stressful environment. Tempers are raised. People get frustrated. And it's been an environment that I didn't really know existed until that day. And learning how to navigate that environment has been, I think, one of the great blessings of my career.
Yeah. And there's so much on the line. It's so high stakes. There's someone's life, essentially, certainly their leg or their hip or something. But it also creates a pressure in the office. They're pretty hard people to get a hold of, aren't they?
Getting in front of decision-making orthopedic surgeons is definitely difficult, and requires a bunch of different skills. But I think that's building the relationships they're built by being prepared, by understanding your product, by recognizing when to say I don't know, rather than maybe not telling the full truth or not having full disclosure. I'll never forget, a doctor said one time in a conference I attended, a rep that says, I don't know after my first question, he may as well not be in my room. But a rep that doesn't say, I don't know until question number 7, he can come into my room anytime. So I think understanding your product really well, being a really good resource when you're in that stressful environment that does cause people to lose their people that are the best folks in the world. They feel the stresses and the pressures of good results and doing the very best for the patients. And so I think for me, the start of building the relationship with the physicians is being excellent at what you do. There's so many people that are good at certain aspects, but I think if you're not great at the basics of being in an operating room, it's tough to be really successful in that environment.
Yeah, and I feel a little pain as I listen to you, because when I go into a business and it's a very specific part of finance that I don't know, for example, it is hard, difficult learning with a very quick and steep learning curve. And as you got that opportunity to understand how to put these implements into people's joints and limbs, had to be an incredible amount of studying and science and learning the product, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I say to my kids, I believe in 3 key factors to success for for people in this world. One, is work ethic. If you choose sales or whatever you choose, you have to have a personality that connects with people. But 3 is passion. And so I found a lot of passion, in those early days of instruments spread across my floor and what goes next. And if this was my grandmother, what would I be concerned about? And so I think when it was all on the line, the learning was easier because you're not only passionate about what you're doing, but you're passionate for the people whose lives it affects.
Yeah. Well, as I've grown to know you, passion is one of the key attributes that you have. Tell me about, I want to ask you a question about that, because I've watched you tear up like you just did in a couple of topics. And when you were early and you saw the instruments and you were in the OR and you're in the front end of this career that you love so much and that you've had to pivot a couple of times, you're at the end of not the end, but you're heading into the fourth quarter of your successful career in this industry.
Sure.
In the beginning, when you saw those and you something happened inside you, and I want to guess at something that's unique to you personally that others could borrow, and that is, it seems like when you get excited about something a little bit, and you see that it's good, there's something inside Brett Parkin that lets it generate and develop and lets it go and grow. And other people may feel that same thing and think again and think and look and ponder instead of just let it well up and become passionate. How would you describe that feeling in the beginning as you saw those and you let it grow into this great passion that you just expressed?
I think that the passion comes when you really want to be an asset to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, it was, if I didn't feel I was very successful after that case, I would make sure I took time to touch, feel, put those instruments in the places they went, understand, I should be the very best educated with those on the team, right? And I should know when they need something, that's in this tray in this position. And for me, I'm not very smart, so the way I learned was touching and feeling and experiencing and learning from my mistakes. And I washed the instruments tons of times just so I could put them together and think, okay, what goes next? What step did I miss? How could I keep somebody ahead? How could I have helped make that case go smoother? So I think that passion leads to you a purpose, right? And once you have a purpose connected to the passion, then for me it made it easy. And I actually now see it and love it and think, okay, this is there. It's a joyous part of the business. But in the world that I live in now, a lot of the young folks that I've hired, now we have people that just run around and put the instruments together and deliver them from hospital to hospital. And the people that are selling the devices for us and helping in the operating room environment, they don't have as much hands-on with the instruments. So I think I've watched a lot of them struggle because that doesn't happen. And I always suggest, go back to the very ground level and put the sets together, touch everyone, know what every instrument does. So when you're called upon, you can really shine. And then when you do present an opportunity that might be to sell something new or present a new product or be an addition to what they're doing that also helps your purpose, you've built some street cred because they watch and they know, like, oh, just ask Brett, he knows. Just Brett will get it. He's got it. He knows where it is. And so I just think, for me, that's that passion then gave the purpose to be, how can I be an asset to the team, be the very best at my position.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It touches on something that immersion research I never knew about and that I've used with clients a million times now, and it's a bold immersion in the physical space and in the physical things, not just the people. The people are so important. We're going to talk the rest of the time about people and human beings and things like that. But to immerse yourself in the space, in the things of your work, or in the customer's problem is so important. In fact, I remember being dragged over here into your office, and you got out what are they? They're balsa wood models, and you made us actually do a surgery as amateurs, and it didn't go very well, obviously. But doing that with some of your lower level employees that are entry level, trying to get them feeling the reality of the customer's need, or the patient's need in this case, is a brilliant move. Yeah.
I think as your business grows and you know, I think one of the reasons for me that was why it was so much fun to grow with the business is I kind of did every job, right? From the guy that puts the instruments together and runs them around, it's super important, to the individual that's selling, to the individual that's trying to now hire and grow a business that can take care of multiple, you know, opportunities. So I think, you know, for me, it's good to understand the whole business as a whole. It's been a blessing in that hands-on training with not only younger folks in your career, but for me it was a big blessing of the new surgeons that came and were learning at the university. They would come here, and you know, we would do that, have that same experience. I'm sure most of them remember it, and laughing and taking a saw, and it's not really the stress of a patient, but it's kind of learning the steps of the procedure in a comfortable environment. Again, kind of like you were saying, Mark, touching stuff and feeling stuff, and then that kind of learning also built a nice relationship with that as they started into their training, you know, gave me an opportunity to make a nice connection, you know, for a lot of the years that I spent almost, you know, 3-4 days a week at the Huntsman or the University of Utah hospitals.
So a little competition, little teeny bit of levity in a situation that in a normal thing would be life or death, and just build a relationship like that. That's interesting.
Here's the steps, and knowing, and okay, Brett has some answers maybe that he can help us with, and you know, and so that was that touching and learning that way is great, not just for understanding the product, but it's great, I think, in building relationships. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to how to start relationships, I want to go basic again, because you are unique in this regard. I think something, probably your mother, but other things, something got into you, and I hear the theme of hard work all the time, and I've done service with you, so I've worked with you and watched that your pace is 3 times the ability to move that my mind can generate to move this body. And so tell me where the heck that came from, and your basic philosophy of hard work in this life.
Hopefully you're editing this, you know, but you know, definitely my mom. You know, I was blessed with a mom that worked hard. And, you know, from a little kid, we tried to beat the clock. You know, she'd set a timer, and let's see if we can weed this much of this garden bed by this much time. And, you know, my dad, no doubt, super hard worker, but best gift they gave me. And I think just as a kid, I learned to be a hard worker. I'm super grateful, especially I think in sales, where your role can change easily. It's not like maybe the hard work that takes to be a lawyer or a doctor or something else. In sales is a little different because you know, products can change, companies can be sold, things can happen outside of your control, and so you frequently have to rely back on your basic core principles, and hard work. Learned from my parents. Super powerful, big blessing. And my kids will laugh and say, oh, my dad says, you know, when you leave his home, you may not like him, but you're sure as hell know how to work hard. So, you know, that's been a saying that I think hopefully my kids believe in too, and or teach their kids, and you know, I think there's no substitute for it. Yeah. It's a huge blessing.
Yeah, you have an obvious connection with your parents on that and your kids on that. I want to ask you a strange question, which is that I think I've noticed, as I've listened to you talk about it over the years, I've noticed that you have a love for the work and working hard itself, independent of your parents and your children, that you have this relationship with hard work and fast, hard work. What is your relationship to it?
I don't know. I guess just I feel like I still have kids in my home, so I'm an example, and so I kind of think, you know, the part of that is part of what I watched my parents do, and I try to follow through with, and I also love, you know, Mark probably just saying that because he sees me working my yard, and you know, the great thing about yard work is, you know, you can put a couple hours in, you can turn around really quickly, see your results, and I think that's fun. You know, oh, I cut that lawn and the lines are really straight, or the edges are really tight, or that garden bed is lovely weeded, or whatever it is, and I think that's fun with that kind of physical hard work. I think in the business world and building a business, you had to look at it a little differently. You could see the hard work after one case, but if you're really trying to build a big distributorship and expand and add a lot of people, you had to also be able to kind of see some delayed gratification of the hard work. And I guess to me that then connects to ownership, and why for me it was such a blessing in the early days of my career to be a distributor where I owned my business. I knew there was a value to it as I built it, and so that made it lots easier to do. So I guess it's just been something kind of ingrained in tight, and I do enjoy working hard, and especially in the yard, because you turn around and go, wow, that looks way different than when I started an hour ago, and off I go. So anyway, that's kind of you to say.
But long term, towards creating value in an organization or a customer base, is set a big set of relationships in the society. Last question on this. So you know, and the audience knows that my work is to go out and work with companies, and I was better not say exactly where I was, but I was at a group, a company, set of executive leaders this last week, and the question was asked as they were introducing the day, and I was the first half of the day, and then the senior leader was the second half of the day. One of the leaders that I picked up socially before the meeting, the others weren't jiving perfectly with. There wasn't a perfect level of trust in each other and work. When they did a quick update to start the meeting, like, tell us the pros and cons, tell us where you think the level of trust is now in cooperation. He not only answered a low number on the trust and cooperation, he also gave a very strange but somewhat common answer. He said, when they asked what he wanted to prove over the next little while, he said, I think we're in a good place. I don't see a lot of need for improvement right now. I thought that was an interesting answer. That's not what I see generally out in the world that is required to make a living and cooperate and build a good company and you know, really progress the jobs of customers and clients in their lives and their companies and such. What luck have you had when you've run across employees that just didn't know better? They didn't think there was a need to work harder or do better. What luck have you had changing their mindset? Have you had some luck with that?
Well, I think one, they got to see you working harder than you're asking them to work, and so in order for what you have to say mean anything. Two, I think you have to. They got to know you care. You know, I went through I had a lot of employees over the years. And a group of young folks, which was a blessing for me because I loved their energy and their passion, and they learned things really quickly. and they drove my vans, and they picked up all our instruments, and I knew all of them. I knew them well. I knew what they were studying in school, and you know, they could come into my office and talk to me, and I think because there was that relationship that was built, and they saw me working hard, and recognized I was trusting in them a lot to do what needed to be done, because I also would come into the office if we had missed something and the surgeon had to make some different things because we didn't have the right instrument or had to wait for something. I very, very honestly and openly, probably some of them can tell some pretty good stories of Brett Parkin, but explained why it was so important to check things and what was missed, and let's learn from this mistake, you know. And so I think one, you have to work harder than you're asking them to work. I think number two, you have to have a personal relationship with them, and then number three, you have to be honest. You know, it hurt to let some of them go, but eventually you had to be honest and say, look, this isn't working for me and my business, because your choices are not just affecting you and me, they're affecting, you know, all the people in this company. So I think it's been an interesting, you know, journey and learning that process. I've learned a lot of lessons, but I do think you got to be the hardest working one in the show.
Yeah, interesting. So that's the real answer: the mentorship, the example, the modeling, then working harder, and also being honest. But if you could only rely on the intellectual, I'm curious to ask you. You're in the moment that I just described I was in. You don't get to have a relationship. You're not allowed to have a relationship with him after. You're not allowed to model anything. You just have a couple hours and really only 5 minutes to address that specific issue. What do you say? What is your pitch intellectually on him working harder and better? What do you think? What is the way to talk about that, do you think?
Yeah, I guess the gentle may be, you know, you may ask your employees, would your employees say the same thing? You know, if you're saying, hey, we don't need anything to work on. So I think if that's really how you're seeing your company, you probably should look a little deeper and ask some other people. I don't know, I was in sales, so we always had a number to hit. So we were always working towards a number. So it was nice to have a goal. And it was nice to see it, and I saw it different ways in my career, from hardly ever to every single day, you know, as technology changed. But having a goal and knowing at a certain time I'm going to look at this number and understand where I've come in a year, where I've come in 6 months. And so if I would also then say, if you don't have anything you're working on, then what are your goals? Or, you know, if you don't need any help, you know, like, so maybe analyze what goals you're setting as a company, because I think that was one of the things as a business owner I tried to do, is look 5 years down the road and try and say, what things is my company struggling right now that I can start to do to change that culture in 5 years? And you know, I could talk about a bunch of things we looked at, but I think if you're not looking 5 years down the road, if you're not looking how to improve, if you're not understanding your competitors, it's a tricky spot. And so maybe ask some other people.
Yeah. When you started this, and you started trying to break into doctors and hospitals, and by the way, I do understand, and you can talk about it when you want, that you're not just selling to a single doctor that you're trying to get an appointment with and come in his office. You're selling now to a whole hospital organization and boards and committees and things like that, but which is far more difficult. But you're in the beginning, and you're selling to that first doctor, having these things thrown across the wall or across the room. What was you said you saw a path, or you need to see a path forward. Did you see a 5-year path forward where you wanted to take this, or was it just survival? What was your mindset about the future back then, in the beginning?
To be honest, I came out and looked in the want ads of the papers. I waited to be picked up outside the hospital. Thought maybe I should do something different right then. And I was studying, maybe thought I'd take the MCAT again, and it was my father, who was an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, that gave me this advice. And he said, Brett, he said, if you're if you're going into medicine because that's your passion and that's your calling, it's the best job in the world. But if you're going into it for money, there's lots easier ways to make money than in medicine. And I'm not sure that was my passion for doing medical sales was just money, but I sure didn't feel like I had that passion to do all that to go to medical school. So that's kind of when 9 months later I really threw myself into the business. I was married, and I was looking for a future for my family, and I fell in love with it, and so like any job, it took a second to, I think if I'd have just after that first day, been thrown to the wolves and wasn't right what my first employer did to me. But it really helped the bunch of employees that I hired, because I never did that to any of mine. And I talked to them about my experience, and I promised them I'd never put them in that situation. And I told them if they were in uncomfortable situations, that resources they had to do that. So it also taught me empathy, for as my business grew, and we were adding new sales individuals, making sure they were brought on the right way. But the start of any career is going to be, bumpy and rocky.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's switch horses and talk about relationships, and let's talk about the individuals before the big committees and everything. I love some of your stories. I remember the framing story.
The what story?
The framing.
Oh yeah. No, that's a good one.
But if you have better ones, I'd like to hear some of your creative ways that you've started at the very beginning a relationship with a stranger.
Yeah. Well, like I say, the very start, Scott, you got to be good at your job or what you're doing. But once you get that little window, look for opportunities. The world's changed a lot since my early days, and so it's a little different. But one of my first opportunities I was working with a surgeon that, was looking to add some value to his home, and I had just remodeled my basement with my uncle. And so I said, why don't my uncle and I come help you remodel your basement? And anyway, it caused a really, really nice relationship that's, blessed my life for 30 years. That was like in 1995. And I couldn't be more grateful for that, and couldn't be more grateful for that opportunity. So I think, and it's funny, just in that process, my wife was pregnant with twins. I'll never forget one day, our basement wasn't quite finished, and Uncle Dick and I were going between, these two homes, and she'd say, wait, you're going to work on his house and not working on ours. And anyway, we laugh about it now, but it was really a nice way to build a relationship. I was lucky early on. I skied a lot with customers. I have a lot of reps that are good golfers, and they built relationships on golf courses. So, obviously building that relationship, anytime you can get away from the operating room environment and do something social. But they're also busy. They have lots of friends. So I think as a rep, you got to look for those opportunities and take them, whether it's helping remodel a basement, whether it's going skiing, whether it's picking up the game of golf, but there's lots of opportunities, I think, to do that. But it only comes after you've proven yourself worthy, to say, okay, maybe I'll go, give this individual a shot. So
because they get plenty of those opportunities, right? They have to first see something in you. But the framing one's interesting. I kind of chuckle inside because I can picture, some big sales process consultancy coming in and say, step one, get your uncle and go frame the prospect's house. That's not exactly what they teach, is it?
No.
And usually it works far better, those types of things, than what they teach. Yeah. And the relationship, that very early start, is everything.
And the great thing, it was all three of us framing, all three of us doing the sheetrock, and lots of times my uncle would just show us, and it was the two of us, so it was really, and my uncle's payday is my twins were born on my uncle's birthday, so so it was pretty good remembrance.
So great.
Yeah.
Well, and even skiing's interesting because golf is kind of cliche in sales, and of course you go golfing with people. But I know you well enough. I grew up on the entrance to a golf course, and you grew up near a private one. But I know that that's not your addiction. Right?
I'm not very good, and I don't play very
I'm
often.
mediocre, and I live right next to it. But everyone tries to go golfing, and there's so many people that want prospects to go golfing, or new relationships, new executives they want to meet for partnership. And skiing's more intense. It's more like, even if they haven't gone, you can take them to the bunny hill, but you're sitting on a chairlift for a few minutes many times, and there's mistakes made and things to laugh at, and it's a vulnerable situation, unlike golf where you hit it in the rough at worst. Interesting. Great.
And I was lucky also to work in an industry and that had meetings, right? And so there was nothing better than getting a physician to come to a meeting and to spending some time with them, whether it was going to a baseball game or even a beach or whatever. But I always encourage my reps as they're learning in the process to get a physician and see if they won't come to a meeting with them. You really build a relationship. And I think the cool thing that I certainly understand as a rep, and I hope physicians understand, is once we have as a rep and somebody who really cares and is passionate about what they're doing, once we have a personal relationship, now we're even held tenfold to the line to be the best we can be and make sure they have everything they need in surgery, and how can I help the process, and how can I go to bat for them on pricing or whatever it is in this kind of new interesting world in healthcare. And so it's just interesting that once that relationship is made, boy, my good reps, they'd run through walls for their physicians. And when they didn't have one thing that they may not even use ever, they're stressing and worrying and searching all over and calling people. And I love that about that relationship part of medical device sales, is that once that relationship is built, it not just benefits the sales individual, but it really, if it's the right sales individual, it really should benefit that surgeon, because then that sales individual is like, I never want this guy to not have everything he needs to be successful and give this patient the very best outcome they could get.
Because that can happen. They can show up with the wrong part, the missing thing,
not check your things, not look at your instruments, or lots of things that you have people that run around, but in the end, it's that sales individual that's in the surgery with the physician, that's responsible for his implants, or his or her implants, his or her instruments, because that is the piece that your value is.
Yeah. Well, I love your early relationship meetings. So before we go beyond the individuals, do you have another one that is just a little later, like, once you got started? Was there a really difficult relationship that you were after to start, and it was hard to get the time, or they wouldn't cooperate, but you finally creatively got it with hard work?
Yeah, I think just being persistent and doing your thing. There's, and maybe it not be there, but the respect level grows with that individual. And as new things come around now, 20, 25 years down the road, where the very first case I did with this surgeon, they built a custom hip. It was built incorrectly, and it was a really stressful full case in my career. I can still see. And I saw him the other day. We laughed about it. I presented a different product to him. He said he would try it, and so, never ever used all of or much of my hips and knees, but a respect level grew that is kind of fun, that I have something that doesn't compete with what he's doing, that he's willing to take a look at. So, I think for me, just that consistency of day to day doing it the right way, eventually gets a small industry, and people are going to see, and don't blink, you're going to be, almost 60 and have 30 years of career behind you, and that says a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah. All right. So the times have changed, and you don't have to use network names or organization names, but talk about the difficulty of pulling out individuals out of a committee and getting to know a committee or a set of people that are going to decide on what you do or not, and orchestrating the larger bureaucracies that you have to sometimes.
I don't know. I kind of look at that and say you kind of have to, as you work, take the time to get to know people again, but also what are their interests, and then as you prepare for your next meeting, be willing to remember a name, and if you're not very good at that, you have a notebook and write some things down after these meetings. And then early in my career, I used to use the excuse, and but I had to watch Sunday Night Sports Center because I need to know what my doctors, all they did. I need to know what the Redskins are going on. I need to know what's going on with the Raiders. I needed to go what was going on with the Panthers, But there were all these teams that I had to look at and watch the highlights, and then. Loved doing surgeries with these guys, and then we could talk, something that was outside of orthopedics, and so. Whether it's football, whether it's guns, whether it's hunting, whether it's something, if you can find something personal that you can connect with, and little by little, oh, hey, I found this, or I saw this the other day, I thought you might be interested in this, or, boy, your Raiders were really bad again this week, that always a good thing, so.
Well, it's great. I think most executives and even sellers, when they go online and they see someone's profile and they see that there's a particular interest, the immediate mindset is, well, I'm just going to talk about it, and that will be my pass into this person's life and this guy or this gal's life, and that's not quite deep enough. And I hear from you, it's not quite deep enough. It's at least about the season, but it's also maybe about fishing and maybe about going to do skeet shooting or something that is activity based and realistic, that you can really immerse in and get that conversation going and get to know each other. It's interesting. Tell me about, if you start at the beginning and someone wants to build a business, maybe not in your industry, maybe you're in your industry, but you're in the fourth quarter. You're starting the fourth quarter now, and you're at the beginning. Give us your 5 or 10 ideas, maybe 3, whatever you want. Tell us like we are your children or a young person that says, I want to do this and I feel the passion. Tell us what the steps are to build a business into something like you've built.
One, I again, I'll go back to, you got to know your ground level. You don't need to know every single job in the company, but you gotta know from the ground level what you're doing, the basics. 2, you have to trust in people. I mean, I've been so blessed. I hired sales individuals, and the very first sales individual that I hired, she still works for us, and she was my secretary. And I had cases going on at the same time, and I said, hey, how about trying a surgery? And she killed it. And I said, harder to find a rep than a secretary. And then the next person that came in to be my secretary, she still is. I still work with her. Mm-hmm. She's awesome. And then took my key sales individuals. We rarely lost anyone. They all stayed. They were part of the team. They felt connected, they felt supported, and so believing in your people is so important. And then I think you have to learn to understand and love your customers. And I'll never forget, as an early distributor, I was at a meeting, and a gentleman that was running a distributorship in Texas, and everything in Texas is 5 times bigger than it was in Utah, of course. But he said, he asked the question, who are your customers? And I started naming off these doctors that I, care so much about. And he said, no, you have to understand your customers are the people that are working for you as well. And so I think seeing those, I've always tried to see those people that were my employees, whether they were W-2 reps or W-2 runners or people that were, doing, the billing and all the things that are so important in our business. I had to see them as my customers, and how would I, and then as I'm going and as my role transferred to being more in a managerial role and managing all these people, that helped me, because my customers, for me, had always been these individuals in an operating room in this stressful environment that I was trying to, fill a part in on the team of this team. And on this team, I needed to be another part for them. And so I think understanding the role that you fill on that team, and then being able to fill it. So, seeing your employees as your customers, and then obviously your customers as your customers, and being willing to do about anything for them. Early days, we didn't have trauma rooms, and when the phone rang, I can tell you times I was halfway through cutting a lawn and I put my stuff down and took off to the hospital, and you had to be responsive to the needs of your customers. And I think that's been the other thing that's been, our surgeons really learned to believe in us, to call us, I need this by then, and know we were going to have it there, and know they were going to have everything. And that added a confidence to the people that were selling it. It's hard to be a good salesman if you're not confident in your supply, right? If my supply's not coming, if I'm not sure I'm going to have everything I need to be really successful in this case, why would I ask for other cases or for other products, right? So being that support system, been part of the core values of kind of what I did and watch these guys do and grow. So,
well, you're in kind of a central part in our locale here in this city, and most of my clients are outside the city, but I have a couple of clients in the city, so I come by here every once in a while, and you have a gas station right across the street, and so I go in there and fill up and get a drink, and I look over and I see your people moving quickly in a Brett Parkin motion. And it makes me curious. I loved how you just said, I loved the point that you made, but I also loved the detail of it where you said, well, you also have your team, and you have to figure out what role you're going to play on this internal team. And you could have said, well, you're the boss, or you're the CEO of this team, and you have to tell everyone what to do, right? Yeah. That's not how you said it. So I get that you love them and you support them, but how do you manage them?
I've always I was very gentle, but I think that's just part of my nature. Obviously, you got to have difficult conversations at times. And you have to understand what part of the business you're managing. My sales leaders, I loved them to death, and they didn't need a whole lot of managing. They're very aggressive guys that needed more support than manage. They need to call me, I need to have answers to their questions, I need to be able to help them in their surgeries or whatever, but they didn't need me to tell them to go do this or go do that, right? And then the wonderful team of women that we had that were doing all the billing, and they didn't need any of my managing. They were amazing. I couldn't do their job, so a job I can do, I'm probably a little tougher on the management. I can sell and I can put parts together and run that around, but these I never learned the billing and the coding, so the job I didn't know how to do, I managed that differently. I supported, how can I help? What do you guys need? As we expand as a company, they got their own space, their own bathroom, their own, break room. I had women that worked for me that then had babies and then came in at different times of their stages that I would never be in the world that I am without them. So again, they were not individuals that needed me to manage. I could give them tasks they wanted to, they would amazing getting them done, but they didn't need any management. But then take my young guys, individuals downstairs that they needed a lot of management, and so we had 4 people that helped manage them, and because I knew them and was part of their lives, it was easy when I really had to go down and help. But I think understanding what people need, what kind of management, is super important. It's not just a plug-in formula. Everybody gets this equation. No, especially as the business owner now. If you're paid to manage a sales team, then that's a little differently. But if if you're a business owner and you're saying, this is how I manage everybody, that's not how I was, and I didn't think my people needed it that way, and I think, my people would tell you they're grateful for that.
It's terrific. It's terrific. So it almost sounds like your client relations for that set of customers internally that you talked about, that the ones that didn't have to be managed closely because of the stuff that you knew and they didn't know, but you were just responsive. You were quick to respond. Great socially in how you responded. So you were their client relations internally, and you're the boss. It's terrific. All right, have you ever had something pretty dang hard that's happened in your career? I mean, you've gone through 3 quarters. We have all had something really challenging in work or life that affected work. What's that for you?
I mean, for me, that probably was super difficult was as a young device salesman. I maybe had 2 or 3 customers early on, maybe the first 3 years, but they were busy customers, so I was busy, and they generated a significant amount of money. And then one of my customers, chose to go with another company, and this was a customer I was very close with. We had, holiday celebrations together. He was the first one that met my twins outside of my wife and I. She had the babies. I woke up the next morning. I did cases with this doctor all day long, and we walked up. I introduced him to my twins. We're very good friends. But and at the time, maybe I was hurt, but I came to understand, he was putting food on his table too, and he got an opportunity, an option from, to help him. So, but to lose half your business overnight, and that's basically what happened, was devastating. And I just remember, thinking, and having a partner by my side that just kept saying, I've watched you go through other tricky things, you're going to find your way out of this. And then 2, what it allowed me to do is to again look a little bit deeper into my business. What's the best 5-year plan? How's the best way to get to know the future, surgeons that are going to be in my area? And fortunately, our other customer was integral to the University of Utah, and so, I spent a lot more time at the University of Utah. I got to know those residents and fellows that then came out into our areas that have been wonderful supporters of what we're doing, and gave us opportunities to help salesmen find, a foothold in a business, in a geography. So, as hard as that was, it forced me to look at my business and say, where are my other opportunities? Put my energy into those opportunities, and then, 5 years down the road, watch those opportunities really, really blossom.
Yeah, that's terrific. That is a scary moment, half your business. 10% hurts most people, but I mean, I am still in that stage. I have a dozen or 10 clients at a time max. Really should only be 6 or 8, and when a big one leaves, it hurts. So that is a big consideration. Yeah. You don't have thousands and thousands. Okay, just to finish.
I think if your core day, like I so believe if it's less about the numbers and the money, and it's more about getting up and doing the right thing every day for this passion of what you're trying to do, all those pieces fit in place. Yeah. Especially in sales. And that's the world I know. I'm a commission salesman. I have been a commission salesman since 1992, right? And so it's how I make my living, and I love it, and I'm proud of it, but
you're a worker and you're a salesperson. It's who Brett Parkin is to a great extent. Not the majority, but a great extent. And as I watch you, I think one of the things you underplay is that while you knew how to remodel a basement back then, you didn't know how to remodel a big building like this. You didn't know how to put together a fleet of vans. You didn't know how to do payroll for hundreds. you had to learn some serious non-scientific things, and that's, you had bet on medical school, so you did a medical education, right? And so how did you learn all these very practical things of growing a business large from scratch?
Well, one, I learned that being the owner of the business, I quickly found out that the problems that didn't get solved or didn't get seen and prepared for, I was the one that had to come solve them and fix them. So as being a business owner and looking down the future, I had two philosophies. When I had a problem, I either threw money at it or I hired someone, and I gave that responsibility to somebody else. So for me, a lot of the problems happened to be we were growing so fast with our salesmen doing such a good job and getting our product in, and I needed more people to run things so these salesmen felt supported, so they felt like they had everything they needed to be successful in these surgeries, so they'd go out and find more surgeries. So, okay, let's buy another van, let's hire another guy, and let's now then put a manager over these guys. And so, we went from, myself and then Anna Lee to, my goodness, we were just over 100, when, they bought my company out a couple of years ago. So, it was a pretty big undertaking, and you learn by mistake too. You listen to your people. I was fortunate. Becky, who's been with me forever, Brett, you need this, or look out for this, or watch out for this, and so amazing reps that would tell me where our needs were. And so I think if it was less about what this need's going to cost me, I run my business such that I have money or can hire people to help me with where these needs are. And, pretty soon you look and your people are happy. You're going to win. One of my heroes is John Huntsman, and I love the line at John Huntsman's funeral. His son, I think it was Peter anyway, was CEO of the chemical company, said, "My dad didn't know anything about chemicals, but he knew the chemistry of people." And I think if you know the chemistry of your people and how to get the best out of them and support them the best way they are, and then maybe even get out of the way, like do your thing, just tell me when you need me to help you, and then when they call, help, be there, resolve problems. So that's been a good mentality for me as a business owner.
Yeah, I love that. So 2 last questions. The advanced system I help people with leading their mid-sized company is called Bold Encounters, and I named it that way because bold is not overly aggressive. It's vivid, it's strong, it's noticeable, but it's also powerful and potent. And the encounters is an interesting word because we can't do anything alone that's really that great. Cooperation is what humans are all about, and anything great takes multiple people, and you have to do what you've done. And so we interact with people, but interactions can be fleeting, they can be transactional. And in our work, it was a new discovery for me 2/3 of the way through my career that one of the big accelerators in productivity and results is the interactions between humans becoming more consequential. And so an encounter, the definition of an encounter talks about consequential and memorable in such things. And so the last 2 questions are about each of those words and how you think of how they affected you and your business and your work to this 4th quarter of your career. First, tell me about your thoughts about the word bold and how it fits you and your style, because you definitely feel like that to me. And then tell me how you interact and how the idea of an encounter that's consequential rather than transactional fits what you do.
Well, I think in the bold part, again, it comes with confidence. So you have to be confident in what you're going to be asked to do in that operating room environment by that surgeon. Do I know my products? Do I know how to solve certain products? And so once you're confident in your product, then it's a huge blessing. So, I always tell my guys, if you're not, you have a bad day, go back, get confident in your product. And then I think you have to be able to, be willing to make sure, at least in our environment, they know your name. Hey, Dr. So-and-so. I work for a company called Biomet till they got sold till in 2015. So for almost 25 years of my career, and I was Brett with Biomet, right? Hey, Doc, Brett with Biomet, right? So in that bold part of it is just getting out your name. Everybody knows it's an uncomfortable encounter when I run into somebody and I think I should know his name, but I'm not really sure. Do I call him dude? Do I call him bro? Do I, and so I just think making sure, they start to know your name, and that's really the bold part of it in our environment. And then I think in terms of making the encounter memorable, again, that just comes with doing your research on your customer and being research on your product. Sometimes you may never have anything personal discussion with your customer, but he knows you've done a really good job because you've kept that surgical tech 3 or 4 steps ahead of that surgery, and the surgery's gone really smoothly. And then he wants to have another encounter. And it may not be because I'm a great skier, I played golf, or I took you fishing. It may just be, I'm really good at my job, and your cases go better when I'm in your operating room. And then once he sees that or she sees that, then you can build that relationship. Okay, now how do I strengthen this relationship and make that benefit? So sometimes sales folks get this tendency, hey, I can go in and woo people, and you probably can in certain industries, but that only works so far in the medical device industry. If a guy likes me just because I say the right things or said that relationship will totally change if you don't come prepared in the surgery and you don't have what that person needs to give the patient the best result. It's way less about the relationship outside than it is about your relationship with your products. So it's kind of that double-edged sword that you have to be prepared for both, because they're super important.
Yeah, one of the words associated with an encounter is that it comes, and with bold, is gravitas, and it's not just the meaning of he's got charisma or she's got charisma, or they as a group have charisma. It really means that there's a direction and a confidence that you're talking about, and the ability to handle the pursuit of that direction and what you're all about, really hard work, gives someone gravitas, a presence that people follow.
I like that word.
So it's really great. I just want to thank you for something specific in this time, this hour we've had together. Directed hard work is among only a handful of the most important things in this life, probably. And so for you to get emotional and share how important that is and why, I think anyone who hears this will really benefit from that. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well,
super powerful.
I was
Brett
taught
Parkin.
by the best, Jim and Bonnie. So,
thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on, go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments, share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com, click the Let's Talk button without obligation, and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.